Fantastic. I'm so excited to see everyone here tonight. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to our November BIA Data Jam stream. I'm very excited to be here. My name is Chris Whitney. I'm the Director of Industry Experiences with TripleTen. I am responsible for our projects and our events that help students to be prepared for the world of work. And this is one of my favorite things to be a part of. So I'm so excited to be here and to bring this to you. Tonight, we are hosting the November Data Jam. So I'm glad that you can be here, and we'll tell you a little bit about what the Data Jam is all about. If you're new to this space, this is a friendly competition that occurs for our students during their normal coursework. These are super short competitions where a group of students get together and they jam out a bunch of work to meet the prompt. This one is a data jam because the content is a little bit more focused. They are jamming in the work on the data. So what does that mean? So the data jam consists of two parts. It's working with data and it's giving a presentation, which we're going to get to see tonight. Last week, our participants were divided into teams and they were challenged to collaboratively, analyze the provided data sets to confirm or refute the claim that millennials aren't buying real estate and to fact check this claim using real US housing data. Our teams only had 6 days to put these projects together. So today, the teams are going to show us their projects, and then our judges will review them next week. The judges will evaluate both the data and the presentation, and our results will be posted on the Hub by November 28th. All of our students and all of our viewers can vote for their favorite project during this week, and the winners of our audience award will receive a special prize from TripleTen, which is very cool. You just have to write the name of your favorite team in the comment section to this stream, and your vote will be counted. So now we're going to jump into the reason we're here, and it's my favorite part, and that is the presentations. So first, I want to wish everybody good luck, and I'm very excited to see what you've come up with. So we have two teams. First team, we have Yuri Dashevsky and Josue Arnada. They are team one, and they will present first. So guys, the floor is yours.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay. You just put this up. I'll be sharing presentation. Okay. Um, Please let me know when you can see my screen.
We see it. Excellent.
Okay, great. Okay, Josue, he can take it away for us.
Okay, so as Christina mentioned, we are examining the claim, are millennials buying homes? We did that through an analysis of trends and data. We're going to be exploring some home buying patterns of millennials and other generations through some data analysis and visual representations that we created.
Okay. Are millennials really not buying their homes? We're going to be looking in this investigation at the millennial home buying trends by analyzing the data that we got from the Fred platform and also the data provided by TripleTen. Through this examination, we will be clarifying if millennials are refraining from home purchases or if maybe there are other factors involved.
So why this all matters and how it kind of ties in. So we'll be showing this through several economic factors that have impact the different generations over the course of the timeline for the years that we were given. So the first generational trends and major takeaways that we were able to identify is that generational home ownership gaps do exist, particularly with millennials being the lowest that they have been in the last several decades. Post 2008, that kind of created a long-lasting disruption. Especially with the younger generations, the gap widened. So recovery was there, but not as it was previous to the recession. A couple of patterns that we did notice was that older age groups consistently had higher home ownership rates. They were mid to late in their careers, so it makes sense that they were the most stable and predictable home ownership patterns. For middle age groups, specifically people 35 to 44, it does show a major decline after 2007. This age group, which included older millennials in the 2010s, showed a reduced ownership in one of the clearest generational shifts that the graph does see. If you look at the numbers, all of the lines do tend to go downwards, and then they briefly recover. Younger adults, 25 to 44, have noticeably lower rates over time. The strongest evidence that millennials, are buying homes at these lower rates, and also at the same age that previous generations did, is likely due to economic barriers rather than to changes in lifestyle experience. So that last slide answered what happened briefly. Over the next couple slides, we'll look at why it happened, and we'll look at each a variety of economic factors individually.
Okay, housing costs. Let's take a look. So we are noticing a very clear and repeating pattern happening in our chart. We're noticing that whenever home prices are surging faster than rents, the market will become overvalued, which, as we could see, had happened in the '08 crash and the recent global pandemic. And with this overvaluation, it will pretty much lead to a result with having a weakening demand, and buyer pullback, unfortunately.
So one thing that we did notice extensively was that income wasn't keeping up with housing costs. In the early 90s, the average home cost about 4.5 times what the median household income was at that time. While homes weren't necessarily cheap, they were still a little bit more attainable than they were today. From the late 90s and kind of going upward, the gap widens. Median income increases sharply, but no big jumps. And then the home price does significantly grow a lot faster, especially around the mid 2000s, and then again around 2020 during COVID time. In the last couple of years, specifically by 2022, affordability did dramatically worsen. The average home had a value of excess of $500,000, while median income stayed around the 70 to 75,000 ratio. That means that the average cost was about 7 times more than the average household income, which was an enormous shift from the 4.5 time ratio that was mentioned earlier. Key takeaway in all of this was that household income was rising a lot faster than what median income could, and there was simply the cost just kept going up, leaving younger generations to fall slightly behind.
Okay, income is rising. But yes, as Josue has said, the income has been rising. We can see across like all age groups, under 25, 25 to 34, 35 to 44, 50, 45 to 54, and 55 to 64. Generally, income has been growing at a steady pace for the most part. But of course, the other problem is, while at the same time, home prices have been skyrocketing up. That is pretty much going to cause an affordability gap that is going to make it a lot tougher for the younger generation to be able to get in on home ownership.
So a big point that we wanted to examine was affordability, and we were able to do this by dividing the median household income and the average home price index for each year. And what we significantly noticed was that it was mostly a downward trend. The graph here shows that higher values equal less affordability, meaning that housing costs rose faster than incomes over time. A couple of takeaways that we were able to associate it with was it peaked in the 90s, then it improved sharply by the mid 2000s. After the housing crash, affordability briefly rebounded, but never returned to the earlier levels that we saw. Since 2020, affordability again did worsen, and the overall trend that we were able to notice was that there continues to be existing barriers that makes entering the housing market, especially for the younger generations, for millennials, Gen Z, that much more difficult.
Affordability is at historic lows. As we've seen in the previous slides, the analysis is showing us that it is unfortunately that we have reached unprecedented lows where the gap between wages and home prices have been increasing, which will pretty much result in either new or existing home buyers from entering the market.
So this next section kind of helps to just highlight a few key comparison points across the different generations at key points in time. So the first one, starting out with 1980, this is where home ownership rates for baby boomers begin to rise significantly as the economy expands and interest rates decrease. A decade later, we are within Generation X when they start to enter the market with increasing home ownership rates, and again, coinciding with economic recovery post the recession. By 2000, we see millennials begin to reach home buying age, but the economy is marked with a lot of uncertainty because a lot of people see how expedited the growth is and how inflated some of these prices are becoming. 2010, post-recession, millennials are recovering from the economic challenges following the housing bubble burst. A lot of that is due to high unemployment and the surmountable amount of debt that they have, so with student debt being one of the biggest factors. In 2020, millennials have begun to recover a little bit financially, but again, that pace is slowed in homeownership rates. There are definitely some challenges there. There's just not enough to go around. And again, with the average home price being in excess of $500,000, there's a lot more barriers and a lot more to consider that makes saving for a down payment and with increasing amounts of rent as well to make it harder.
Okay. So putting it all together, although the perception is that millennials might not be buying homes, the data would actually show the opposite, but at a slower pace for them. This change is due to several factors, such as the rising home prices, stagnant wages, and high levels of debt, as Josue had mentioned. And with that being said, that is our presentation. Thank you very much. Are there any questions?
Fantastic. Thank you so much for this. I do love a Prezi presentation. It's very nice. And I like how it flows. Yeah, I was wondering if there was anything that surprised you. I think you found a lot of really great information, but were there any surprises?
Any surprises? I guess
I
like
think,
no,
oh,
you
sorry.
go, Josue. I apologize. Yeah.
I was going to say that in the early 2010s and maybe around the mid to late 90s, that the correlation between home prices and the average median income at the time, there wasn't as big of a gap as there
Mhm.
is today, and it was a little bit more affordable.
Right. And it was interesting that you did see, so we do have that slow rising of income, but the housing prices are just at a much different rate.
Yeah, yeah, seeing that shift, seeing that change. It's different when you're just talking to your parents about it, about you're talking to them about how expensive things were, um, and then to hear it from their perspective and to see some of the data change over the decades it was a little astonishing to me too.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for this presentation. We might have some more questions at the end after Team Two joins us.
Okay.
So we are going to ask Team Two to present now. We are very excited to hear from, I'm sorry, Geeta Vijayas and Brian Henderson. So the floor is yours. Very excited to see your presentation. Thank you for being here tonight.
Okay, can you hear me now? Let's start with that. Yes, share
Yeah.
screen. I can see my screen, share. Okay, now can you see my screen?
Yes, it's loading.
Perfect. Okay. So, well, good evening. Sorry for the technical difficulties. And thank you for joining us. We are the ownership equation. Um, Today, we explore the question that's more personal and structural. Millennials aren't buying homes, or are they? Well, we have heard the claim that millennials aren't buying homes, but is that true, or is just a myth? So we analyze home ownership rates by age group and compare baby boomers, Gen X, and millennials at the same life stage, between 28 to 32 years old. And then we layer in economic data from the Federal Reserve statistics, FRED, income, home prices, saving rates, mortgages, cost, and debt, to understand the forces behind this trend. And we found that there are delays, and these delays aren't just personal, they are structural. And understanding the equation is the first step towards solving it. With that, we go with the generational setup. So starting with the first opportunity, where with the big picture of what is happening, this chart shows homeownership rates for each generation, ages. Let's start with 25, 34. That's the typical window for buying a first home. And we can see the trends for each generation. Boomers, that more or less will be in this section, the 1990 to 1996, more or less. And then so you can see the millennials have already the lowest rate. Gen X reaching about 57%, and boomers hover near 54, nearly like on the 1990s. That's a last stage. Even as millennials aging to 35 to the 44 bracket, here we can see that the change, or there's not much shift in that trend. The millennials cannot catch up. Boomers reach 57 in the range, and X is about 52%, and then millennials just about 52.5, understanding that they still have more years to come to feel this trend. But still, this is like there's something happening, and then each generation owns less and later. So millennials aren't opting out out of home ownership. So they're arriving later and facing a fundamentally different path. that we're going to start to show. This affordability comes with comparing in this slide the median household income with the cost of the homes, mortgage rates, and then we can see the affordability ratio. That is a comparison between the price against the income, and then we can see that the prices are surging, and then the income is increasing, but it's a slower pace compared to the surging on the cost that you can see on this right side, that it started in the 90s with 119,000 to finishing in 2023 with 429. So this ratio is increasing 5 times on that sense. It's a 5 ratio that shows that the gap between what people earn and what home costs has widened dramatically. And with higher nominal incomes, millennials face a housing market that demands more and give less. The mortgages rates, they've added another layer of pressure, especially in the recent years, because you can see that there was a downward trend, but then moving from 2021 is increasing and in a higher pace, because it's around 6% right now. So it's getting tougher because it's a compound on the load that persons can have to handle in debt in their budget, in their day-to-day budget. So this is the affordability gap, and it's growing. Last, down payment. That is for my part. Just a moment. So this is an analysis to understand how long does it take to save for a home. This chart shows the years needed to save at 10% down payment at different rates. For example, let's start with 10% to show that baby boomers just needed a few years to get to that goal. But then Gen X started getting longer. But then millennials face the longest climb, and often double or triple the time. When millennials save 15% of their income, let's consider that they still lag behind Gen X with that 10% scenario. So yes, saving behavior matters, but it can fully close the gap that you can see here. And this delay doesn't happen in vacuum. It's compounded by student debt, rent, inflation, customer, and stagnant wages. We'll explore those pressures next with Brian. I let the floor to Brian.
Okay. All right. Can everybody see my screen? All right, let me just move these all out of the way here so I can present smoothly. Now let's go into some of the economic factors causing this delay, which are pretty hard to ignore. One major news item lately has been the ever-increasing student loan payment burden, while the other, equally bemoaned news item is the rate of inflation. These two factors, when taken together, paint a pretty bleak picture for a potential millennial home buyer. Whoops. Wait a minute. Why is it getting hung up? There we go. Because student loan payments take up so much of a typical millennial's budget, such a person may turn to either taking out a loan and or applying for a credit card to continue to fund one's lifestyle. Meanwhile, rent indexes in major cities across the country shows a consistent upward trend owing to the number of young professionals moving to those cities to be closer to their jobs. This just happens to be the National Consumer Price Index for these rents. So that the next part will be easier to understand, I'm going to quickly go over what constitutes a region in the United States of America. The U.S. Census Bureau divides the U.S. of A into 4 distinct regions. First up is the West region, which includes not only the Pacific Coast states and the 2 states outside the continental U.S., but also the Intermountain West, the Western Great Plains, and the Southwest. Meanwhile, the Midwest is both of the Dakotas, the Eastern Great Plains, Upper Heartland states, and the majority of the Great Lakes states. The South is the former Confederate States of America, states that were sympathetic to their cause, and any state that is generally south of the Mason-Dixon line separating Maryland from Pennsylvania. Last but not least is the Northeastern region, which is not only the upper mid-Atlantic, but also all of New England. Having said that, let's now look at regional variations on incomes, house prices, and times to save. Typically, a region with a higher median income will have a higher median house price. Thus, the Northeast and the Western regions having the highest median incomes also have the highest median house prices. For now, anyway. Meanwhile, going on to budgeting, with a house price being with a down payment on a house being typically 10% of its price, and budgeting rubrics all saying one should save 10% of one's paycheck every month of every year, we see that once again, it is the Northeast and the Western regions that typically have the longest times to save. Thus, compared to baby boomers and Generation X at the same life stage, millennials encounter a housing market defined by widening gaps between income and house prices, lower savings rates, and heavier student loan burdens. Using the standardized FRED data that we've discovered, we found that while baby boomers could save for a 10% down payment in just a few years, millennials need a significantly longer wait in spite of the increasing incomes. These challenges are not evenly distributed, of course. Regional analysis reveals that areas with higher median incomes will have the higher house prices, as I said, which means we have longer savings timelines. These findings suggest that the barriers millennials face are not simply behavioral or cultural, they are structural and systemic. Calls for better budgeting or lifestyle changes miss the deeper economic shifts that have reshaped the path to home ownership. Without targeted policy interventions or structural changes, the dream of owning a home will remain out of reach for many in this generation.
Thank you so very much. You know, one thing I really enjoyed about your presentation is the different factors that you pulled in and
Yes.
watching the growth of student loan debt, rent prices. I found that fascinating. I mean, we think about it like we'll rent until we can afford to buy, perhaps, but if we have very steep rent costs, how can we save? So very interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And you know what, Brian, I was really interested in your map. First of all, geography is really hard for me, so I love seeing a good heat map. But do you agree with how those regions are defined and how they're impacting the average of salaries and costs?
Not exactly. I feel like the lower mid-Atlantic states ought to be grouped in with the Northeast, Maryland and Delaware, and maybe even include Virginia in that as well, because of all the federal workers that
Mm,
have come that live in the Virginia side of the DC suburbs. And given how, especially weather patterns lately, have seen inadequate response to like snowfall,
mhm.
maybe Virginia ought to be included in the Northeast as well.
Yeah, very interesting. And I also think California. So in the West, we have California, we have Utah, we have Arizona. I mean, huge.
Exactly. And I happen to be living in Utah right now
Are you?
because the Salt Lake City area attracts so many tech jobs these days.
You're not wrong, my friend. Fun note, my son also lives in South Salt Lake. Maybe
Interesting.
maybe I'll see you when I come visit. But no, I thought this was really, really interesting. I love the data. I love the findings that you all brought. What I would like to ask you about is kind of the other side of it, not necessarily the data side of it, but maybe Josue and Yuri, maybe I come back to you for team one and talk about what it was like collaborating. I know your work in TripleTen many times is on your own, and maybe this was your first opportunity perhaps to collaborate. What was that like?
I can actually speak to that. Yeah, so I guess like even before like we had our introduction a Zoom call for this project, I kind of took it upon myself to maybe like set up like pretty much like a Discord server for us to like collaborate on the ideas and just like get started like early as possible like on figuring things out. We made sure also to stay in contact pretty much every day. We even tried to make sure that we allocated at least like an hour or two per day, if possible, later in the day, making sure we account for each person's busy schedule throughout the day. And I think that probably was a very successful thing for us.
Sounds good, being very proactive. What do you think, Josue?
Um, Yeah, no, it was at first I was feeling a little bit uneasy because with Yuri being on the East Coast, he's 2 hours ahead. Um, but he was very flexible by the time, I get home and I'm usually and ready to hop on the project. It's already well into the evening his time. So he was very accommodating, even when we were having issues, how to structuring the data in Tableau. It was a big help sharing files. He was able to give advice for me on how to structure the tables in the very beginning so that I could do my version of the project, he could do his, and then we spent a couple nights just figuring out, the best parts of both of our presentations to put it together.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, I think that that is key many times of identifying what are your strengths, what can you do, what can you offer to this project, and how can we capitalize on those. Maybe Geeta and Brian, why don't you talk a little bit about any challenges that you came into as far as collaborating in totally different spaces where you have to be in an online environment?
Well, Brian was really a collaborative person, I have to say. We have different mindsets on how to do the job. So the main challenge was finding that common ground, like adding different perspective to get one result. But we made it. He was open to get ideas and share ideas. Of course, time frames. I did had some issues at work, so kept me a little behind, but he was always supporting me and flexible to support that time for me. And then I was helping also in giving a broad perspective. First, it's like we built together the storyline. That was what we spent uh, Saturday and Sunday, more or less. We were like looking at data, and then we were like, okay, what do we want to say? And then we built the presentation upon that, and we share, okay, I'm going to start, you're going to finish, we are only two, so we can make it. And then sharing on Wednesday, it was more about, we use Tableau Public, so we don't have a collaborative system. So it's funny because we always need to work in two different systems and make sure that the data that we're sharing is structured the same. For example, timeline, because we were working with the first dataset that TripleTen gave us, and it was 1992, 2003. So we cut everything more or less to that time frame to create that sense of continuity among in each slide for the whole presentation. But yeah, no, it was interesting to work with him because he's really intelligent, and I learned from him. I'm always learn from my teammates, but I learned from him too today. But for this
Fantastic. Brian.
Yes. Discovering what Tableau Public can and cannot do was something of a challenge. There was some misunderstanding in the process, but once I was open to learning how to make my part of the presentation look in line with hers so that we could have a uniform appearance, everything just clicked finally.
That's wonderful. And it came together wonderfully. And I love that both teams really found some differences in the data, found some different, well, some similarities too. Unfortunately, I think there are certain things that it is what it is, right? But that you really approached it in a very different way. So thank you so much for your presentations, for your information. And as an Xer, I certainly agreed with a lot of what you said. It's been in life. So that's all for us tonight with this BIA Data Jam presentation. Thank you to everyone who is watching. Thank you to the students, the viewers. Please make sure to comment below so that you can cast your vote for your favorite project. The results and the winners will be announced by November 28th on the Hub. I'd like to send a special thank you out to everyone who helps to organize this data jam. Arena, Omar, Alana, Liana, Olivia, Denise, of course, Anastasia, and me. I'm happy that I could be here with you tonight. Thanks again to all of you participants. You did a wonderful job. We are always impressed by what you build, and events like this couldn't be possible without enthusiastic and brave students that are willing to put yourself out there in these very quick projects. So again, my name is Chris Whitney. You can find me on LinkedIn. And until then, thank you for watching and have a wonderful evening. Take care, everyone. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Certainly.
Thank you.
And I'm honored to hear you say what you had to say at the end.
It was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.